board. Planning board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recorded. This meeting is being held both in person and virtually through Microsoft Teams, pursuant to Section 20 of the Acts of 2021, allowing public meetings to be conducted remotely so that board and committee members, as well as members of the public, can participate remotely. Recognizing that we have a quorum of the planning board in the room, we have Mr. Steiger, Mr. Holman, our alternate member, Mr. Russell. Ms. Dack sends her regrets for this evening, so does Mr. Demalia. We do have a quorum present in the room, so we will do regular votes, unless we end up having John join online. With that said, do we have anybody either online or in the room to comment on something that's not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, moving forward into minutes acceptance. Made available to the board through Microsoft Office and through their packets. We have the minutes from the previous meeting, which was held April 2nd, 2025. As is our typical practice, I'd like to, unless somebody objects, I'd like to hear a motion and a second to accept the minutes, and then handle any revisions during the discussion phase.
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
Here in a first and a second. How about corrections?
No changes on my end.
They look generally pretty good to me, although they do also remind me that we need to follow up with Alec on the letter to the Open Space Committee about the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Any other corrections on the minutes?
No.
All right, calling a vote,
Steiger, aye?
Holman's aye.
and the chair is aye. The minutes are accepted. Moving forward on the agenda, we have the planner's report. I guess, Alec, to come back to a point that we briefly discussed there in that conversation, where were we at with the letter on behalf of the board to support the open space recreation plan?
I just need to prepare the letter for you at this stage. I hadn't heard any more feedback from yourself or any other member of the board, so I can type that up fairly quickly, get it out by Friday.
Okay, excellent. Anything else you have under the planner's report? I know we have a bunch of items that you're on for tonight. I don't know if you want to just handle them all, or...
Nothing substantive. What I will note for the board, so I'm sending Leanne a list of items. You are my first of 3 consecutive meetings this evening, so I will have to step away promptly at 7 o'clock. But I'm sending Leanne a list of various items and actions that the board should take in my absence tonight.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So-
Whoa.
Oh, that should fix that. All right, I was just logging into the meeting online so that I could see if there were any comments online myself, so that's what was causing that. So I guess then in that case, let's hop right into it and go into the public hearings so that we can get the maximum juice out of Alec before he has to go. So under new business, we have public hearing, proposed zoning bylaw amendments. The Hubbardston Planning Board is conducting a public hearing pursuant to MGL Chapter 40A, Section 5. We are continuing, that's why the date was wrong. We are continuing the public hearing, presuming to, all right, just for procedure point on this. On the site plan approval and on the floodplain district, we are opening the
Yes,
public hearing.
correct.
Is that a procedural defect we need to deal with, Alec?
Did I mistyped it.
Are you looking at the agenda, Alec?
You may not have any microphone going.
You're on mute. Can you hear us now, Alec?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. You can just read what's listed on the agenda itself, and that'll be sufficient. And then we'll just want to ensure that the written version backs it up. But you're fine with what's on there.
Okay, but it was otherwise probably posted at town hall and such. Okay. So, all right, call into order the public hearing pursuant to MGL Chapter 40, Section 5, to consider the following proposed zoning bylaw amendments. Article 9, the amendment of Article 9, which is site plan approval, and the amendment of Article 13, which is the floodplain district. Alec, can you walk us through what's going on with that?
Absolutely. So for members of the public and for the board, in your packet, you should have a copy of draft site plan approval rules and regulations. As we've discussed in the past, those will supplement the administrative components of your site plan approval zoning bylaw, which I am recommending staunchly paring down. My proposal is that you remove the more administrative components of Article 9, things like site plan form, site plan content. You take those out and create the administrative document, and then I've proposed certain recommendations to be added to your bylaw, as well as the rules and regulations, which will strengthen your ability to have your decisions survive an appeal, provide you better maneuverability as the board grows and evolves with the types of applications you'll receive, and ultimately it cleans up town meeting floor. One of the biggest gripes we get from members of the public on town meeting floor is that so often we're having to deal with these little bits and pieces, these small administrative components, but the common practice today is instead to adopt rules and regulations that govern the way you consider these applications. You'll note that the several revisions are included in a proposed article blank. I don't know the number that it was assigned on your final warrant, but it's revisions to Article 9 site plan approval. And what was originally sections 9.1 through 9.7 have now become 9.1 through 9.11, but you'll note that substantial sections have been removed and reused as the basis of your rules and regulations document. The board has discussed this action item on several separate occasions. You'll also note in your packet is included a memo that I provided to the select board and to the general public, scoping out the work you've done to date on all of your various articles, and that helps date back the work we've done.
Right, would anybody on the board, like to suggest that we waive the reading of the full article into the record?
Yes, so moved.
Excellent. So, to build on what Alec had, well, any objections? All right, so we're waiving the full reading into the record. So to build on what Alec had talked about, this has been identified as a strategic, project for the land use department for some period of years now. Because as we had it is, it's kind of the old way to do it. This is one of the steps in the process in terms of just modernizing our process for approvals and for reviews, and is going to provide us some opportunities to recodify in a way that makes sense. And for the benefit of the public, a lot of this language that's being struck out is appearing back in the administrative rules, which is in the attached document, which is how most towns tend to present these kinds of rules these days. So, with that, do we have any questions from the board for the planner?
I have one very brief comment on this here. And I think it makes a lot of sense for us to have the rules and regulations for site approval. My only question here is under what will be now section 9.5, site plan decision enforcement. the very last paragraph, last sentence, where we actually putting a value on the penalty, which is $300 per day for continuing violation. My question is that something that we could also incorporate as part of the rules and regulations so that it does not become part of a bylaw and therefore require changes in the future with an Old Town meeting, should there be a need for us to do so in the future?
Yes, you're welcome to insert that in your rules and regulations. Regardless of where you include it, it all tracks back to whether or not the town has accepted the provisions of Mass General Law that allows it to enforce through non-criminal disposition its various decisions and bylaws. My understanding from the bylaws that yes, this has been adopted previously, and this follows the standard suit for that. The 2 years is what's common practice. You could change that. But ultimately, whatever you choose, I would recommend you either include it in your draft rules and regulations mirroring this language, or if you're proposing to strike it from the bylaw, that's fine as well. Just know that doing so defaults to whatever the zoning bylaw itself is enforced under.
Yeah, I believe this is a higher amount than the default zoning bylaw, because that's been one of the criticisms of our default enforcement provision, is that it's not clear what the penalty should be, and we've debated that extensively in the past, although I can't specifically quote a lot of it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, where the issue with enforcement hasn't so much been the amount that we have available as penalties, it's been the wherewithal of getting the select board to pay for the attorney to do the enforcement.
Yep.
Where ultimately the issue has come. Because at the end of the day, under the civil enforcement, either the building commissioner or an attorney on behalf of the town of Hubbardston needs to go to Gardner District Court.
I understand. So the only reason I'm proposing this here, because correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the rules and regulations for the site plan approval are not going to be voted on during the ATM, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so, again, if we put something in the bylaw itself, and should sometime in the future we want to change that, again, it requires an Old Town meeting and the
Yeah.
whole,
I think that
and we've had
makes sense.
problems where we've tried to put certain values in Old Town meetings. It just requires us to go back to the Old Town meeting and have changes to the bylaws, which I think is just, does not make a lot of sense, whereas if we have it as part of a rules and regulations where we have a much more flexible way of making those changes, I think may make sense. I definitely think we need to have them, and it has to be very clearly laid out, but I think that the right place should be shouldn't be in the in the bylaw itself.
Okay. Alec, do you have any knowledge on what any peer communities do for that? Do you know if folks tend to put it in the rules and regulations, or if they put it in the bylaw? I know historically Hubbardston has done the fines in the bylaws.
Yeah. Enforcement measures and fines in particular are strongest when they're included in your bylaw itself, because the town, through adoption, has acknowledged that that is the enforcement procedure that will be followed. That being said, I've seen many communities include it in their rules and regulations. As stated, if you don't prescribe it in this section in particular, then it defaults to whatever non-criminal disposition method the town has previously adopted.
What if, and if I may quickly question this here, is that if we still have wording in the bylaw that basically states that the amount will be actually defined and specified in the rules and regulation, therefore it implying that the town has given us the flexibility of imposing a dollar value, not within the bylaw itself, but a dollar value within the rules and regulation.
I guess my only concern from it is, right now we have something, whether or not somebody looks at that as being more substantive than what we're doing, because ultimately what we're doing with this change to the bylaw is really purely administrative at this point. Whereas fundamentally changing the or setting it up in that way where somebody might argue it's a fundamental change in the enforcement mechanism, might draw more objection than, I don't know, we haven't had an opportunity to really push that through, I just raised that.
I
as-
kind of agree with what Francois is saying, because we've talked about this with other bylaws, and it makes sense, but will that make it harder to enforce if we don't have it there?
Which is what your point is, right?
Well, no, my point is whether or not it makes it harder to pass, because somebody looks at that as a more substantive change than the other ones. That's what my concern is. I'm totally on board with the idea that the number should be able to grow over time.
Yeah.
It's how some things have like $5 fines,
Mhm.
because the law's been around for 100 years.
Right.
And people laugh at it.
Yeah, 300 I think will be meaningful for a while, assuming.
I agree as well with Jacques, Francois, to modify this and take it out of the bylaw and put it into the rules and regs, so
Yeah.
we have
Okay.
that flexibility if we can do that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the main reasons that, Alec has outlined on some of these other bylaw changes, to put them in regulations as the bylaws, to give us that flexibility that Francois is referring to.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that sounds like that is a strongly spoken majority of the board, so yeah, that sounds like a change. Any other questions from the board?
No, that sounds good to me.
I think it's important to just comment again on Francois's last line item, to state in the bylaw, rather than the amount, but state that they're giving us the authority to adjust that fine, as appropriate, to prevent us from being defaulted, as was discussed a few minutes ago, to the,
Yeah.
to a lower number.
So we could state that failure to comply with the planning board's site plan decision will result in a penalty or fine as specified in the rules and regulation for site plan approval for each day and continuing blah, blah, blah violation. So
Yep.
that pretty much would take care of it.
Yep.
I don't intend for this to be something that's flexible on each and every violation. It needs to be stated and
Yeah.
consistently
Yeah.
enforced from time to,
Right,
and only
right.
change maybe on an annual basis.
It's just that the dollar amount is here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So is
changing,
that.
changing the regulations involve having a notice and all of that,
Okay.
so. Yeah, so does that sound good, Alec? You got everything you need on it?
Yes, I have made a note here. Does the board have any other sections they wish to discuss of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
I'm otherwise good with this one. How about everybody else?
I have no other, and that's the only one that stood out.
Yeah, so with that correction, any public comment?
I've got a recommendation, it's not momentous. New section.
And just
9
identify yourself for the record.
Mark Reski, 5/8 New Templeton Road. The new 9.6, where you're talking about the associate member. I think what you're actually trying to say here is that the purpose of the associate member is to deal with absence, inability to act, conflict of interest on the part of any member of the planning board, or in the event of a vacancy on the board.
Yeah, that,
Instead of the word vacancy.
well, on instead of in.
On instead of in, and then insert or after planning board.
Yeah. Yeah, so that or in the event of a vacancy on the board.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with that. The rest of the board on the same page for that, address
Mhm.
that Scrivener's error. Did you catch that, Alec?
No, could you repeat it?
So, in the new 9.6, it will be or conflict of interest on the part of any member instead of in the part of any member. And then, that sentence should end with, of the planning board in the event of, wait, no, what's the word there? Oh, or Yeah, there we go. There should be an or there.
or in the event.
Yeah, or in the event of a vacant seat on the planning board.
Okay, I've made those notes.
Right, so what action do you need for us to take on this one? Because I wanna get your last 10 minutes to talk about the floodplain.
Yeah, so, my recommendation to the board, is to recommend the article as amended, to town meeting floor.
Okay. So, because this is part of the same public hearing, we're gonna wanna close this public hearing and then do that, so. We're not gonna close this one yet because we have to talk about the floodplain bylaw.
Alright.
So Alec, can you, talk to us about that one?
Yep, so at the board's previous meeting, you did briefly discuss the floodplain district article. The board will remember that there is a specific section you do need to pay attention to, but as a reminder for all, the purpose of this exercise and this bylaw is to comply with the Mass floodplain model bylaw and to stay in compliance with FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Providers regulations. I've been doing research on this further and further, as my understanding has grown, it's roughly a 20% increase or 25% increase that anyone who receives flood insurance would face should the town fall out of compliance. And so I do strongly recommend that you revise the simple section that's needed. Leanne, if you could note for everybody in the room, because I don't remember off the top of my head, there was only one matter left over that the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, had flagged for us, and specifically a section where the town had been more restrictive than what is required from the bylaw, or from the model bylaw. This is one of those rare instances where the state does allow the town to be more restrictive than the model bylaw, if you so choose. But at your last meeting, we had discussed that if you want to take it out, it's easier to remove it now after the fact than it would have been to add it on later at town meeting floor. So I recommend you take up that one section in particular. I want to commend Leanne again for her hard work with the Department of Conservation and Recreation, bouncing drafts back and forth to ensure that your new bylaw will meet the updated regulations. And once that one section has been resolved, you determine whether to delete that section or whether it should remain. At that point, you should move to close your public hearing and then move to recommend the two articles.
Yeah, there's actually two sections where we're more restrictive than the bylaw requires, but the DCR did specifically point out the subdivision requirements, model bylaws number 10, 9, and 10. She asked if they're staying in the subdivision rules and regulations or moving into the floodplain bylaw. If they're staying in the subdivision rules and regs, then those regulations will need to also have the required abrogation, disclaimer of liability, and severability bylaws. As it stands right now, it's kind of like a footnote on the floodplain bylaw. So if you'd like to leave it as a footnote on the floodplain bylaw, we don't really have to change anything. That was my understanding.
Alright, where is it at, the bylaw? I have this one.
It's the very end.
Right to the numbers.
Well, maybe it's not in the version that we made up for town meeting. Oh, yes, it is. It's the very end. A, flood hazard avoidance. Any subdivision located partially or wholly within the Zone A or Zone AE of the flood insurance rate maps prepared by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, shall comply with the following. 1, subdivision design shall be consistent with the need to minimize flood damage within the floodplain prone area. There's 4 sections of it. So if we'd like to leave it here as like a footnote to the floodplain bylaw, we should be okay.
Well, I guess next on the list of strategic projects is the revision of the subdivision rules for next year. Assuming we maintain a budget item where we have money for a municipal planner.
These are just my notes.
I was just trying to see if I had the right version
You
that you're
do.
discussing.
It's the very end.
I mean, I can argue it making sense either way, but it sort of makes sense to just have it in there and just be done with, since it's a rules item. Alec, are there any upside or downside to doing it one way or another?
Can you repeat the question again? You cut out there.
Is there any upside or downside to putting the flood hazard avoidance language in this bylaw as opposed to putting it in the subdivision regulations?
The only purpose for putting it in your subdivision rules and regulations is that those can be amended much easier than a bylaw can. So for example, if there was an error that wasn't caught in the first process, the same way with site plan approval rules and regulations that we're talking about tonight as well, you can amend those a lot quicker than having to go to town meeting floor and make an amendment there.
Okay, but we're pretty much stuck with this being mandatory language though.
Yes.
So we wouldn't really be likely to amend that specific provision anyway, since it's mandatory language.
Sounds good.
So, might as well just have it here and, yeah. Anybody feel differently?
No.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Anybody have any other questions for Alec about the floodplain bylaw? And we'll take questions from the public too.
Are you trying to bring this to town meeting?
Yes, that's the plan.
Well, I won't stand in your way. But the numbering is such a mess that, I mean, none of the internal references work, where it's pointing to other sections of this bylaw. Let me start with FEMA maps. We've got a reference to firm maps dated July 8th, 2025.
That's the new date, we just got them.
You got them in May from July?
They're dated for July, but we received them in the mail, yes.
Okay.
It was a whole big to-do and the boxes were huge. We actually received them twice and got a call from FEMA. So I can second that. Leanne did a really good job with it.
All right, so 13.3.3. And we're talking about prohibited uses. We're referring to a section 13.3B and 13.3D, which don't exist. And there's a couple instances.
That's actually one of the sections that she recommended discussing because we don't need it. So I didn't renumber it.
In reference to the whole 13,
13.3.
so it would actually be
3.
13.3.3.
Mm-hmm.
Now that Alex is gone, I just think it would be pertinent to mention that Leanne went to floodplain administrator training. So she should be
Above the water line?
I went back and forth with DCR on this so many times. Yeah. So the DCR representative specialist said, this is a higher standard and can be kept as additional bylaws from the MA model bylaw, but we don't have to keep them if we don't want to. I renumbered as I went and left that as it was because it was referencing changes that I made.
Okay, so which specific sections are the optional ones there?
All of section 3.
All of section 3?
Anything that was highlighted in this here?
Yes, correct. Except for potentially D, the storage of salt, petroleum, and other chemicals is prohibited.
That is not optional, or that's just not highlighted?
It's not optional.
Really, so 13.3.3, according to DCR, just needs to be the storage of salt, petroleum, or other chemical products is prohibited.
As she told me.
So, okay, so I'm really confused now.
Mm.
13.3.3 makes reference to 13.3
B or D, yes, that's correct.
B and D, and where is that?
It used to be 2 and 4. It is 2 and 4. It got
So it,
numbered.
so it really should say 13.3.2 and 13.3.
13.3,
Four.
3, 2, 13.3.
4 instead of B and D. So that takes care of the reference issues that you are stating, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I
Now
didn't
separately-
understand, I didn't understand what
yeah,
it was supposed to
or we
be
just
pointed to.
delete the section, one of those two.
Or we
But
delete,
that
I
was-
agree, or we delete the section, so the question is what do we do? Either we correct this here, or we remove the section? And that's our decision.
That's up to us,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Well, she said we could keep it because
It's higher standard.
Do we need a higher
I
standard?
would say, I mean, normally I'm a less regulation when possible.
Hmm.
I'm just trying to work through in my mind where there's, what the actual consequences of it. So,
It's pertinent to note that I'm sending the entire warrant to legal counsel in the next couple days. So if we really have any questions, I can attach them with that email.
Okay. If we don't have to have it, I agree, less regulation the better, but if it's something we really need,
Well, let's
but.
figure out what the regulation is, right? And why is it
well,
there?
so here, both of these items are regulated in other places that aren't this. So the erection of buildings or structures, or the construction of new buildings or
Okay.
structures, except as may be permitted. Like, the floodplain district overlaps with what the wetland setback is gonna be in most
Okay.
places. So
That makes sense.
that's not gonna be.
Not necessarily, it could
No.
be different. Floodplain could exceed significantly where a defined wetland is.
So, let's go. Yeah, it's true, I guess, because of the map. Includes all land that is along any named or unnamed body of water or water course for a horizontal distance of 50 feet from the permanent or seasonal banks thereof.
That's also can be removed if you so wish.
So where?
It's a broad brush approach, I mean, you could have a cliff.
The-
Yeah.
You could have a cliff where 50 feet, you know, you got a 100-foot cliff right next to a body of water, that should not be a floodplain.
She asked if it was being enforced because it's a higher standard, and I don't have an answer to that question.
Cause that raises an interesting question. I don't believe it's being, I don't believe it's being enforced as part of the floodplain district bylaw. It's being enforced in terms of the Conservation Commission issue and the setback issue. Yeah, so I guess it is the combination of 13-2-3 that does that. So what are the board's thoughts on this? On these two sections? And does anybody in the public have any comments on the impact of those two sections?
Did we lose someone?
Yeah, Alec had had to
Yeah.
step into his other meeting.
Right, right.
And then Leanne got a reminder.
Yep.
If we don't need it, I think we should delete it.
Yeah, my personal feeling would be to delete 13.2.3 and then delete 13.3.3, but change, or rather move D to 13.3.3, and add the storage of salt, petroleum, or other chemical products is prohibited in the floodplain district, so that would replace 13.3.3.
Move it up to 2.
Yeah, because with the way 13.2.3 modifies the definition of floodplain, it certainly makes it redundant, and it's not being practically enforced. There's already other enforcement mechanisms on building in that area. Any thoughts from the board on that approach?
I think for the purposes of the floodplain, I think we're fine. I'm thinking that just, I mean, DCR, for example, has quite a lot of say in terms of what you can do even with regards to removal, filling or dredging, for example, or altering of any lake, pond, and river. I had a situation
Right.
with somebody on that not too long ago. So I think we're
covered.
I think we are indeed covered more from an environmental perspective. This is really more from a floodplain perspective. So yeah, I would agree, we can.
Delete it.
Okay, so we've amended the proposal to reflect what we've discussed, which is removing 13.2.3 and then amending 13.3.3 to be the storage of salt, petroleum, or other chemical products is prohibited in the floodplain district. Cause that way we keep all the mandatory language. Are there other items that we need to address?
In 13.3.2, she pulls out the word recreation. She asked whether recreational vehicles are permitted or not. Again, I did not know the answer to that.
So 13.3.2,
Yep, number C, or letter C.
Mhm.
Outdoor recreational uses, including fishing, boating, play areas. She just questions whether motor vehicles are allowed or not. If they are, we have to have special wording there.
So I'm assuming these are motorized vehicles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is public land or this is private land, right?
Or both.
Both, right?
It could be either.
So I know there's some significant restrictions of public land all over the Hubbardston.
Mhm.
I mean, again, I think it just depends on circumstance. If you're on your private land,
Mm-hmm. That's your private land.
that's your private land.
Right.
But in public land, you're subject to the laws and regulations that are imposed either by the town or by the state owning that piece of property.
so we already have bylaws related to using trailers or RVs for occupation, and that it needs to be a temporary use. So I don't think that's something that we need to encroach on floodplain bylaw, because we already have issues enforcing that how it is.
Well, in Pinecrest, a lot owner, gentleman bought the lot, it was too small to build a house on, so he put a camper on it. And it still sits there, it's been 3-4 years now, and we can't make him pull it off of there, and the town has no regulations to make him pull it off. And what he was doing was he was cutting all the trees down around it, dropping his neighbor's trees, and it was quite the ordeal. And he ended up just never coming back, but the trailer still sits there. Is this the same circumstance, because it is a low-lying area. So I don't know, that's why I wanted to
Is
throw
it
it
within
out.
the floodplain?
Yeah, clearly the
A
floodplain
lot
law
of
wasn't.
Pinecrest is in a flood.
Yeah.
All of
Almost the
it?
whole thing. I'm
A
not sure
lot of
all
it.
of it, but a good amount of it is
Right,
just based
and
on.
I'm not sure if this specific area is part of that,
Mm.
but I don't believe there's enough regulations to manage that problem, because we couldn't do anything,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
I mean, if this regulation seeks to prohibit motorized vehicles in a floodplain, is that what this is seeking to do?
That's what it sounds like.
Well,
Well,
it's-
I'd be
it's
all against that.
Recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
Recreational
Right.
vehicles. Oh,
It just says that the following uses of low flood damage potential causing no obstructions to flood flows shall be allowed as a matter of right, provided they are permitted to in the underlying district and they do not require structures, fill, or storage of materials or equipment. Letter C says outdoor recreational uses including fishing, boating, and play areas. If recreational uses include, vehicles, then then according to the floodplain specialist at DCR, they must be on site fewer than 180 consecutive days or be fully licensed and highway ready. If not, they must be anchored and developed to the requirements in building code.
I
So
think
that's-
the majority of the problem here is that these things don't get sucked down and cause damages
Right.
further down, like, you know, clogging a bridge and then causing more damage, or
okay.
causing damage to, you know, other structures, because they're such big, pieces of equipment, potentially.
Okay.
So,
What was the suggestion to?
So her question was, does recreation include
I understand what the
recreational
question is,
vehicles?
that what was her proposal, that if it was including a recreational
Then we
vehicle?
have to have a note that says, must be on site fewer than 180 consecutive days or be fully licensed and highway ready. If not, they must be anchored. So that's what she's saying to include, if recreational vehicles are included.
Which I think is reasonable. I mean,
Yeah.
if we are going to look at it more from a safety perspective and from an insurability perspective, I think that makes
But
perfect sense, doesn't it?
we don't have recreational vehicles specifically called out there, we have recreational uses.
and who enforces that?
You've got that,
But that's what she's saying, is
Yeah.
outdoor recreational uses, including fishing, boating, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also the question is, for recreational vehicles, to outline that separately.
you've got that language in 13.3.7.
Well, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
And it makes, probably for me, that's a new point.
Okay,
Yeah,
great,
so there's nothing we need to do there.
Yeah.
No, sounds good.
Yeah.
Comment?
You can just,
perfect. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
You just identify yourself.
Thank you.
for the record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Stahl, 5 Lombard Road. In addition to what Francois said about damage, structural damage, and potentially, you know, blocking the way, there's also a fluids issue
Right.
with the vehicles, so gasoline, oils, hydraulic fluid, et cetera.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for
Great.
pointing that out, Mark.
Any other discussion points on that?
The lap on that, no. That's great. The last question I think I had was regarding 13.4, number 3, section A. The DCR rep commented, is this saying that all encroachments are prohibited in the floodway or also in the 1% chance floodplain? If it's only meant for the floodway, then this is covered in item 3C and we don't need it.
Do you concur with that?
Well, if it's not, if it's also in the 1% chance floodplain, then we need it. If it's only in the floodway, then we don't need A. I don't know what you all intended by A.
I like how easy of a definition that is. Floodway, the channel of a river, creek, or other watercourse, and the adjacent land areas that must be reserved in order to discharge the base flood without cumulatively increasing the water surface elevation more than a designated height.
Good spot.
Yeah, where is the designated height?
A and C are definitely redundant.
Yeah.
I think you gotta pick one or the other.
C is the language in the model bylaw, so if we're keeping one, it has to be C.
So, the proposed, what is being proposed here is just to remove A and B and just leave C?
Just remove A.
I'm sorry,
Just remove A.
just remove A.
So B would become A and C would become B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. too.
Yeah, it makes,
Take out A, make B A, make C B.
as much as it can make sense with that definition of floodway,
Yeah.
it gets there.
Floodway, that's a new one, that's the channel, I guess.
Yeah,
If that's what you say.
No, that's what an engineer says.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that term before, floodway.
alright, so in the version on the table, we are striking A and appropriately justifying the, appropriately adjusting the numbers.
Yep.
Correct.
Are you making those changes? Okay.
And I'll send to Alec and Nate for review.
Yeah, because he's no longer on.
And
Yeah,
I'll also
yeah.
hand this to you where I'm keeping the notes.
Yep.
Alright.
Any other sections we need to look at?
Nope, that was all.
Alright. Any other questions from the board on this or from, well, I'll do that and then ask for additional comments from members of the public.
No.
Any additional comments from members of the public?
Of course. If you're still on that same page.
Yep.
Page 5. Up on number 2, section 8.2 through 8.4, site plan approval. This, I think,
What section is it?
page 5, top of page, number 2.
It might be different in the little one.
Where it says the application which shall conform to the plan requirements described.
13.4.2.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not sure what we're referring to there. Site plan approval is Article 9. I think Article 8 is special permits, maybe?
Isn't it referring to the preceding section?
Oh, is it referring to the section in this? No, we don't have an 8.
Yeah, there's,
I think he's no, this is referring to, the
It-
site plan approval.
yeah, is it meant to refer to articles, or is it meant to refer to sections?
I think it's articles, but I may be wrong.
At any rate, if it's referring to Article 9, site plan approval, which you're also in the
Yeah, so it would be this.
midst of changing,
Yeah,
those may not
which-
be the
which
right
would be
numbers
this-
there either.
Which once it's changed, would be the site plan submission, the site plan form, and the site plan content. Based on what we just discussed earlier.
Yeah, I don't have that, but, anyway. Yeah, just make
That
sure
will
it's
be
gonna,
this-
make sure it's gonna work.
Yeah.
So this, which says section 8,
Needs to say 9.
and here it's 9, I think we just need to make sure that we know what number this is gonna end up as.
Make sure it all flows
And then-
together.
That
Yeah.
this number be modified so that,
Well, it's gonna end up as Article 9 in the bylaws, it's just the article on the warrant number we don't know until the warrant's finalized.
well, in that case, we should then put 9.2 through 9.4 for the
Yes.
site plan approval.
9.2 and 9.4.
Or just simplify it to just
State the.
Article 9.
Safer.
Of the bylaw.
Yeah.
Of the bylaw.
Yeah, because who knows what happens with the other one before amendments or whatever.
Yeah.
Article 9.
Got it. Thank you.
And then last one, 13.4, planning board. I think the correct reference there is 13.3.4.
Instead of 13.3D.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How do you see that
Thank you
that
very much,
fast?
Mark. Really, thank you.
Thank you.
Like, that really is pretty impressive, like, how do you pick that fast?
He's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, fair enough.
I started an hour before the meeting, I had plenty of time.
You ever heard of speed reading?
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna get into.
So, any other comment from the public or the board? All right, so we have, these two articles are their own public hearings, so they're riding along together. So, assuming that we have all the evidence we want, and also we should clarify for the record, would somebody like to waive the full reading of the, proposed Article 13 floodplain district?
I will make that motion, sir.
Excellent, well,
It's
just
not a motion, it's a
suggest,
proposal.
does anybody have any objections?
No objection.
All right, we have waived the reading of the full article into the bylaw, into the record, thank you very much. And with that said, we are concluding the review of evidence and testimony on it. Would somebody like to make a motion to?
I'll make the motion to close the public hearing for the zoning bylaw amendments under the, under 5A.
Excellent, do we have a second?
I'll make that second.
Any discussion? And, calling a vote?
Steiger, aye?
Holman's eye?
And the chair is aye. We are closing that portion of the public hearing. Now, would somebody like to make a motion, as Alec had instructed, to recommend the articles as revised and currently on the table?
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Any additional discussion? Calling a vote,
Steiger, aye?
Holman's eye?
and the chair is aye. We are recommending the two articles. And thank you to Alec and quite a bit of work that goes into this. And thank you for folks in the public who showed up and caught some really good things. So let me hand you, that's the one. All right, so moving on to the agenda, we are moving into another public hearing.
Continuation.
Yep, once I get my papers organized a little better here. All right, so I am calling to order and reopening the continued public hearing on an amendment to Article 23, Grid Scale Battery Energy Storage Systems, GSBES, and the amendment of Article 24, Accessory Dwelling Units. This is a public hearing that's being continued from a previous meeting on Thursday, April 17th at 2025. April 17th, 2025, the Slade Building. Now, we previously went through these in detail, and we had some suggestions that came from the board, and also came from some members of the public to address some of the cleanup that had to be done in these. And Alec has included a memo in the package that's been made available to everybody on what the history of this has been, and some of the work that we have updated since the last meeting, and made available to all of the members of the board and also to members of the public. We have the updated version from the last meeting, which is designated in your folder as updated from the last meeting, where we've made corrections such as changing the title to more appropriately reflect what we're trying to do, such as grid scale battery energy storage systems, and also incorporating the other changes that were suggested in the meeting. So, Leanne, do you have anything else to add to that?
No.
All right, so a red line version is also included in the file.
That's just the working version from last session.
Yep.
This one here?
That's the updated one. The one with MK is Mark's comments that we worked from last meeting, just for reference.
So you and Alec, when preparing the version that's currently on the table, incorporated all of the comments that we had talked about at the meeting.
Correct.
Alright. So, I guess let's start out with, I guess first, let's talk about, do we want to read the full version of the proposed bylaw into the record for the hearing?
I don't see a need for that, sir.
So if somebody would like to waive that, do we have any objections?
I don't.
Alright, and let's take this with a little bit of a unconventional track, because we do have a member of the public that's also worked on this with us and contributed a significant amount of effort. So let's take a look at some of the sections and see what we still have outstanding there. So I guess does anybody have remaining concerns on the first page? I personally feel like we did a good job addressing the concerns that were raised on it, but does anybody have any remaining ones?
I don't know, so.
Any members of the public have any remaining concerns on the first page? We're already moving at twice the pace we did last meeting.
At least.
Did you get threatened?
So moving on to the second page. Now, there were some pretty significant changes that were done here. We specifically pulled out all of the language related to the different technologies. Noting that we had previously discussed it, and that there was a versioning issue. And we did receive, some feedback from the public on how that is still an issue, and we addressed it, so. Anybody on the board or any members of the public have anything for page 2?
I think I'm on page 2. Is the version you're looking at, do you have line numbers?
Yes.
All right, so line 69 and 70. This was probably a question for Alec, but I don't know, maybe Chris, you and Alec talked about it, but
We did.
where the issuance of a special permit?
Yeah, we
Did you-
did talk about it, and Alec did do research and pull out the documents. My recollection of it was correct. That the way it currently was, I thought Alec had put in a correction for that. Let me check the memo. Cause him and I, we talked about that a couple of days ago, because of the issues, again, with the versioning going on in the publicized version. Article 4, as it is supposed to read from the Attorney General's orders, although it was not yet loaded to the website, was that DES was allowed in all districts by right. Because the subject to the restrictions of Article 23 got penciled off, but she left BES on the line item in the amendments to Article 4. So we had.
But if it's allowed by right, then clearly it doesn't require a special permit.
Well, that's my point though, and that is,
Yeah.
is that there's a difference between BES versus GBES,
Yeah,
right? So grid scale battery energy storage system versus battery energy storage system. We just gotta
Right.
make sure that people understand that if you have a battery energy storage system for your personal residential use, that's allowed everywhere. However, a grid scale based energy storage system,
Yeah.
that can.
That's what we arrived at last
Yeah.
meeting.
Exactly.
yeah, and we may need to come back to Article 4 about that, to clarify, but I think what we have is currently workable.
I mean, it's like putting a power plant behind everybody's home.
Right.
Yeah, so this isn't a problem for me.
Mhm.
If you and Alec are comfortable with it, referring to this non-existent special permit requirement, then maybe there will exist one at some point in the future. It was just a question.
Yeah,
But-
there is a. He has proposed floor amendment for clearing up that language. And on this one, we have to do it by a floor amendment. Off of this version. There was a reason he said that if we're making changes to this version, that we have to do it on the floor amendment. It's been,
I think it was because it already went by legal.
yeah, I mean, I started work at 4, my brain's a marshmallow at this point. Yeah, but there's a reason why we'd have to do it as a floor amendment. And he does have some language for clarifying that he has in mind, or suggesting for it, that we're gonna bring up. We're gonna run, we're gonna bring the floor amendment language in front of the board and the select board before we get there, but yeah, it is a valid concern that is amplified by the fact that there was still that versioning issue that was going on with what's available on the website. Any other concerns on page 2? How about page 3?
It's logged in as the town. We get all the Facebook notifications.
Any concerns from page 3 or page 4? I mean, and now we've made enough corrections where the page numbers don't really line up off the other versions.
The only question I have is this 591 to be added in red. What are we adding here?
It was a note made by Alec.
That was the whole discussion you had with Tim Holly, but, I didn't know that, what, if anything, was gonna be added there.
This is the carbon sequestration and land, forest land.
Sorry, what article are you on, Francois?
This is,
Right here.
start looking at,
Yeah.
line 123.
Okay,
And then
thank you.
133, there's in red, there's this component that says 591 to be added. And this was the discussion that took place last time we met with regards to the loss of carbon sequestration and forest habitat.
We'd also proposed just, yeah, 'cause 5.9 followed by 5.1. We had proposed, oh, we had actually proposed just deleting it. Guess we didn't specifically note that in minutes. Which is fine, you can't have everything constantly.
So for me, this thing is confusing because if you have, I'm just making this up, you have a 10-acre lot and you have a piece of land wherein you're going to be placing the grid-based energy storage system. Let's say that is 2 acres. If these 2 acres are gonna be now in a location which presently is forested, and you have to cut that down, what does that imply? You have to reforest somewhere else for 2 acres? And then the other question I have is, if you're in a commercial lot where it happens that you have forest, I mean, for me, I have a concern when we're talking about commercial lots where most likely these items will end up anyway. And commercial lots typically can be exploited in so many different ways. We're not talking about we're talking about a place where you're gonna be potentially just raising the land for the purposes of clearing it for the purposes of putting a warehouse or putting a structure in where you're gonna be doing some manufacturing or something else. And so I have a concern with this here because this is kind of like just looking at grid-based energy storage systems and singling them out specifically for this mitigation of loss of carbon sequestration and forest habitat, which in principle I'm not against, it's just, I have a concern when it comes to pieces of property that are deemed to be commercial.
Yeah, I certainly hear that, and I think if there's any language here that puts us in danger in an Attorney General review, it's the clause that says that you can essentially only ever use half the property. Because when you set restrictions that potentially make practical barriers, when you apply them to certain lot shapes and lot sizes, they tend to frown upon that. Like, that's why they struck down our last revision to the marijuana bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were like, well, what you're saying conceivably makes sense if everybody lives on 5 or 10 acre lots, but because not everybody can afford, it was a social equity issue, and they used it to strike down the whole proposal of the bylaw, because it would make it, if you didn't have a square lot of a certain size, you were just flat out prohibited. So I would be in favor of just striking 5.9,
Yep.
the reference to the non-existent 5.91. I don't know if anybody objects to that.
I would,
Sounds good.
I would think that that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, cause I really don't wanna have to do this again.
But that's not the reason.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't wanna come to a meeting again, so.
You don't wanna come to any meeting anymore?
Well, it'd be the 3rd time that it goes through the Attorney General's office.
Well, this time it is, and it would,
Yeah.
if it goes another time, it'll be the 4th time.
Yeah.
So it's like, no.
Practice makes perfect.
Alright,
So you're proposing to take off
You
5.9.
can, you can
Yeah.
also bang your head against the wall so many times, it's
Yeah.
still not going to.
Yeah, and the version on the
Fix the
table, we're
problem.
taking out 5.9 and then the reference to 5.91 to be added.
Alright, so that means lines 123 to 133 are stricken, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
So now we're on to the remainder of the page. And then I've lost track of the number, I guess we're on page 6 now.
And again, can I make a comment? I know that we are referencing BES with the understanding that's a tier 1, tier 2 BES. We just put a G in front of them just to make sure that we're like, because like, for example, if you look at line 152, owner operator of a BES shall notify the building commissioner, blah, blah, blah. And then it says tier 2 BES. So can we just put G BES in all of these here, except for where it does not apply?
I think that makes sense. Anybody have any objections?
Sounds good.
Alright.
So, the version on the table, we are suggesting that instances to BES, get changed to GBES.
Yep. Implying that it's for grid scale battery storage systems. In order to
Or
avoid
GS,
confusion.
whichever you had,
Now, does that
whichever you had
make
defined it
yourself
as.
to-
Maybe it's
of
easier to
another
just add the G.
definition?
I'm sorry?
Does that make us put
Yeah,
another
what
definition?
does it say in the
there?
title?
I don't think there's a.
Grid scale,
There's,
No, it
Grid
doesn't
scale
give it,
battery
doesn't
energy
give an
sources.
acronym.
brings another point here. We don't have a
I mean, the
definition
acronym
sections
is
here, right?
BES in there.
We don't have a abbreviations and a definition section here.
definitions?
no, we actually debated that pretty extensively
Yeah.
at one point and made a decision to pull it out.
Okay.
So we just need to, what I would then suggest here is where we are actually using grid scale battery energy storage system, immediately thereafter put in parentheses GBES.
Yeah, we'll do it in the
Okay.
title of the
Yeah.
argument, or, yeah.
Self-explanatory.
So that means, section 5 will also become permitting requirements for tier 2 in tier 3, adding grid scale battery energy storage systems, redefining GS. So,
Okay.
and same thing for section 6.
Yeah.
Under, in the title for site plan application.
Yeah, for the grid scale.
Okay.
Just avoid confusion here.
Alright, so that has us on to the final 2 pages. Final 3 pages. Any additional comments or concerns? And just noting that annual reporting switch to the fire department, as we discussed pretty extensively the last
Yep,
meeting.
that
Right.
makes a lot of sense. So here's a question I always have, and this is for an attorney. Word shall versus must. Right, so let's take light 270. A new owner or operator of a battery energy storage system, and again, which should say grid scale battery energy storage system, shall notify the building commissioner of such a change in ownership. Or should we say must or is required to notify? For me, shall is like, well, would be great if you do so, but
No, shall is a mandatory word.
it means that they have to.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
yes,
Yeah.
shall.
That's why I'm
means
asking
you
from
must.
you must, from a legal
Yeah,
perspective.
generally it's considered to be a mandatory
Okay.
word.
Will.
So, and again, just taking
I like
considerations,
will.
not just GBES, but also like, for example, line 270, it should really say, a new owner or operator of the grid scale, even though there's no abbreviation there. So we need to be a little bit, maybe just do a quick word search for battery energy storage system and
Yeah.
see.
And just to clarify for the record, so, we have suggested, well, we're not suggested, but the version that is on the table is, in every place where we are not directly addressing a tier 1 system, that we are changing the references where it's abbreviated to GBES, and where it is written out, we are changing the reference to grid scale battery energy storage system.
Thank you.
Throughout the entire document. Right. Additional comments from the board, or any comments from members of the public?
No.
Alright, so, this has a second article item that is up.
Yep.
And, we previously discussed this one at meeting. We actually passed what was one of the original most progressive ADU bylaws in the state. And the state in its infinite wisdom decided to create a whole bunch of new requirements for, accessory dwelling units, which made it so we had to redo this bylaw, and actually cut out a bunch of language. We discussed this quite a bit at our last meeting, and we sent some revisions back through Alec. Now, it's important to note in this one, there's actually been some additional language that has been added to this article, where, not only are we proposing the new article, in order to effectuate the change in the new article, we're striking the sections of Article 4 that are frankly made invalid by the new state regulation. So the item that is on the table for this hearing is the one that is captioned revisions as of 5/2/25. And that's the version that was made available at the office and publicized. So, anything with that?
Nope.
Alright, so included within the packet, like I said, is a memo from Alec, the live version that is proposed, and also a copy of the final CMR that answers some of the questions about what the state requirements are on ADUs. So yeah, so this is essentially shrunk down to a two-page
Sounds
article.
good.
Would anybody like to waive the reading of the entire article?
I'm asking that we waive the reading.
Anybody
Mr. Chair.
object?
I agree.
Excellent. So, let's run through this. Does anybody have any issues in the preamble or in the first section? Any members of the public have anything they wanna comment on in the preamble or the first section? So, section 2, does anybody on the board have any comments or concerns in the revised version?
No, I'm glad that it got simplified to, and some of the wording that I thought made it more complicated and was just taken out and struck out.
Simplified, makes sense.
Yeah, and I believe on this one, the Attorney General's office is actually doing a pre-review, or did they already do it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, this one is eligible for pre-review.
Yes.
Yep.
So if there's stuff they don't like, we'll have it as floor amendments. So the remainder of section 2 on the second page. And then the red line additions, which strike out the sections in 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 that are currently invalid under state law. And then finally, or to take any other actions relative thereto.
Nope.
Anybody in the public have any comments on that, either online or in person?
I think Alec did a great job on this for you.
Yeah, this is one of those places where it is, kinda is what it is from the state.
Yeah.
Alright, so, does anybody have any additional evidence they would like to introduce in a public hearing for those 2 articles? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Stahl, 5 Lombard Road. I have often heard various things about the word shall and what its meaning is and its legal meaning, so I looked it up, and legal writing scholars suggest using must instead of shall. This is from the Illinois Bar, and I thought it had a date of 2024, but I cannot find that reference currently. So, although to me, I concur with your usage and what you said during the deliberation there, but I found something else that raises that question.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, we're gonna need you to shepherdize that and then present us a report on the treatment of that specifically in the First District Court of Appeals.
Okay.
Let the minutes reflect that shall means must.
Yeah. It's,
sir.
That takes care of it, right?
Yeah.
Touche.
Yes, thank you for that.
Get it in the
500
min-
word
Get it
essay.
in the minutes.
500 word essay.
Put it in the minutes, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
There's no question.
Alright, so,
Shall we?
We really need to.
yeah. So this is what happens when these go on, although we're still doing way better than we used to do, thank you, Alec. So.
Oh, a meeting like this here would have taken us like 5 hours.
Yeah, it would've, yeah, it absolutely would've.
Thank the Lord.
So, with that said, I believe we're gonna close
We
evidence.
would have had our own conclave.
Again?
Smoke's still black. So, would somebody like to make a
White.
motion to close the public hearing on those two articles?
I make that motion.
And I'll second it, sir.
Here in the first and second, any discussion? Call it a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Woman's eye.
All right, so would somebody like to make a motion for the planning board to recommend, the changes to Article 24 as proposed, in the document, and to recommend the
Article 23.
proposed, which article number?
23.
Yep, the proposed Article 23 for grid scale battery energy storage as discussed at the meeting with the changes that have been presented on the table.
So moved.
Did I get everything in that?
Yes, you did.
All right. Do we have a second?
Sir.
Any additional discussion? All right, hearing no additional discussion, calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Woman's eye.
And the chair is aye. The planning board has recommended those items to go on the warrant and has recommended those items just in general. All right, so thank you very much for the work on that, everybody. That's been years of stuff. Now let's hope for the best at public, at the town meeting. And apparently next select board meeting, I'm gonna be presenting these again to the select board in another public hearing, so.
That's correct.
To
You
also.
have to be there, right?
Chris has to be there, you are welcome to.
Oh, okay, so you're,
No, I technically was supposed to be at the last one, but work. So yeah, if any members of the public listening in would like another bite at the apple in order to comment on any of these, there will be another opportunity when they're held for public hearing at the select board. Because ultimately, what we did here was give the opportunity, the public an opportunity to comment, and we voted on recommending them. It's the select board that formally includes them in the warrant. So, that, back to the agenda. So we had, do we have, any administrative matters?
The scanner proposal,
Yes, where are we at with that?
you guys have to decide whether or not you would like to buy into it. The proposal's included in the green section of your packets. It's gonna be about $881, I believe, per board. It's gonna be split between Board of Health, Concom, and Planning Board. Concom voted to purchase it as long as the other two boards agree. Board of Health met, 2 weeks ago to discuss it and went back to Tricia with questions. They're meeting again on Tuesday to discuss it again. And you guys have the option to decide whether you would like to purchase it or not.
I believe we talked about this at the last meeting. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm generally in favor of it, but still have the same question, which is, has our revolving account been reconciled yet?
So, as of last, our revolving account, according to the end of February ledger, had an ending balance of $9,850.99, which you said.
That is not correct.
And I know I took $400 out of it Monday to pay for repairs to the old plotter that was unrepairable.
And
Wow.
unless we've been really, really efficient with the collection of our 15% fees, that number should be somewhere around $4,200.
I haven't gotten an updated, I've been keeping track myself, but I haven't gotten an update from April yet.
so,
What do you have for a report on that?
It's just the,
So,
The planning board voted to hire her Monday.
Select
board.
board.
Select board, that's what it is, I'm sorry. It's been a very long day.
So,
Yep.
I think
But
we're
yes,
all
they voted
generally
Monday.
in favor of this, but somewhere in the account chart, there are offsetting accounts that pull out, fees that are paid in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to be absolutely sure is that we are not paying fees that have been paid in advance, because those are technically fees that we hold in trust. And I know that there is there should be an amount that we have accumulated, so the number I'm expecting should have gone up slightly based upon the 15% administrative fee that we get off of consulting fees. But we haven't taken a lot of money on consulting fees in the last year and a half, so it shouldn't be up $9,000.
The rest is not planning board.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the
Do we
chart.
have, the end of year balance from 2025?
I don't have a lot. From when I started, I did not get a lot,
Yeah.
so I'm basing it off of the budgeted versus annuals that we receive every month and what I use.
But it's all budgeted, it's not actual.
Correct.
So what we could do is, I mean, I don't wanna be the holdup here, but I don't think we in good faith can approve it until we actually know what's in the account and we're sure we're not accountable to give that back to people.
I will
Um,
ask Mary for an
Yep.
update.
So can I ask,
I'll have Peter
Yeah,
was,
I don't mean to be a killjoy here, but, what do we need this for? What's the purpose of the scanner? To scan blueprints?
Correct.
Just to
Plans.
plans that
but is it a
that
plotter
people
or a
submit?
scanner or
It's a
both?
scanner.
Okay,
What's a
so
scanner?
we
Scanner
can't,
printer.
okay, so town's gonna spend almost $3,000 for a scanner when all of these blueprints are prepared by an engineering firm in somewhere that we can require if we wanted to, electronic, well, no, they can
Flash drive.
email us the plan and we could obtain, electronic digitized blueprints
yeah.
from engineers who prepare these plans.
Yeah.
In all cases, I mean, I don't mean to talk for the Concom, but they can do the same thing.
Absolutely.
And you know, $3,000 when every firm out there has this technology, can just email it to us. If we're looking to eliminate rolls of blueprints that are collecting somewhere
Yeah.
that people are submitting to us, we can just, I think we should be able to not even buy this thing.
Yeah.
as a
What
town.
is your opinion
I'm just
on it?
throwing that out as, I don't know if it's been discussed. I must have been sleeping in the conversation at the last meeting, I apologize.
No.
That's
problem.
okay. My opinion is that the planning board specifically requires a digital copy anyway for, A&Rs and special permits.
So we do get them already. Do we have?
Sometimes people will try not to give them to me and then I hand them back to them and say, please send me a
To
digital
record,
copy.
yeah. Question, do we have any material that still needs to be digitized?
Oh, good.
Probably, right?
Probably, yes.
So then the other question would be is what's the cost of having those digitized professionally at, you know, like a Staples or any place like that, have them done once and
Have
then
a
get,
company come in,
sorry?
maybe have a company come in and do them all.
Usually
Yeah,
we go
and
to
have a
places.
one-time investment versus spending $3,000 on something like this here.
Not to mention the ink that's gonna be needed for this thing.
And
or-
repairs.
I mean, this is a printer as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
So, you know,
repairs.
now this thing is gonna turn into a public printing machine for blueprints. I don't know if we're in business for that.
It's not like I think the building inspector needs to
Staples is
print
there.
these things out and go out on the field with a blueprint or anything like that.
Not that
I'm
I'm
just
aware
asking
of.
because it just doesn't seem like that's the case.
Can we
Not
look
that I'm
into
aware
it
of.
further? Do we really need it then?
well, so there's clearly some threshold issues that we gotta deal with here. And although we all have different reasons for it, we seem pretty unanimous on we're not ready to approve that tonight.
Okay.
So I think we need a clearer statement on what it's actually going to
Be used for.
benefit for our side of the department. And we also need to know what's actually in our revolving fund. And this had come up, I know that this got cleared up not that long ago, because one of Peter's first meetings, we had had this exact same discussion, and rightfully so, it was raised as an issue, like, what do you mean you don't know what exactly is in the revolving fund? And I know that that's not your specific issue, and that there's complexities going on with the town accountant, but we need to know what's going on in the revolving fund, and that documentation on the last time it was reconciled should be available somewhere. I know Nate had just done it when he came in. I might have a paper copy hiding somewhere. But what has to be done is the offsetting accounts need to go in against that, because sometimes that money is, sometimes we owe that money to people. So,
I think we should very clearly specify that at least the way the planning board sees it, unless you have a different opinion, Mr. Chair, but the way the planning board sees it, that at least from the present into the future, we do not foresee a need for a plotter or a scanner of this size, because we can enforce a requirement that all material be submitted electronically to us.
I have no stake in the game, so I respect whatever you guys.
Well, I mean, if there's a question as to why does the
Yeah.
planning board not want that, when we have all of these plans here, we could say, here's the reason. We
They
can,
come to us.
we can enforce the requirement that this be submitted to us electronically.
Yeah.
yeah, and if there's other reasons, we obviously should just know about it. I think we've all pretty clearly expressed that we have a wide sort of feelings, but that we're definitely not approving any of this stuff. Where did I put my copy of the agenda?
Put mine away.
What was the last item?
All right, matters not reasonably anticipated by chair, so there are a couple on those. There's an MRPC meeting coming up tomorrow night, where the new slate of officers are gonna be proposed. We need to find a alternate for MRPC, which is ultimately appointed by the select board, which as of the current moment, the alternate for MRPC is currently Mark.
Oh, that's okay.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, if you still wanna do it, you're totally welcome.
I've never done it yet, so.
So,
Thank you, sir.
so yeah, we need to help the select board identify somebody, ultimately it's the select board's appointment. And we also just received, a request from MJTC, the MRPC affiliate that deals with transportation and, grant assistance for roads, that we need to renew our representatives for that. So ultimately, I believe, Leanne, Eli, and Alec and Nate need to talk about it, but we do need to recruit some people for that. Be it somebody from the select board or from the, planning board. And also with the new year coming up, we're also gonna need to review some of the planning board assignments to some of the other bodies, because we have, a mix of ex officio seats and actual voting seats on a bunch of boards and committees around town because of the nature of the work of the planning board. So we'll need to be approaching that in a month. So,
Usually right after the elections, right?
yeah, yeah, but MRPC and MJTC have already sent requests for please update your stuff. And yeah, it's better to do after the election.
Okay.
But wanted to get everybody thinking about it. So any additional public comments or any additional items to be raised by members of the board? All right, so that leaves us to our final item for the evening.
Make a motion, we adjourn, sir.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Non-debatable, calling a vote.
Steiger, aye?
Woman's eye.
The chair is aye. So thank you, everyone. That was quite a bit of work.